If I would be in power to do things to improve the quality of life in my city, I would work on more circular economy in my city. And we, I think, would need stronger regulations from the European Union on producer responsibility, circularity of the whole internal market. I think in the end that would be really helpful, not only for my city, it will be helpful for many European cities.
I think I will turn to the biggest experts in the city, which are the local people, because they know what they need, how to improve things, especially in the middle-sized city. EU and cities can work as cooperation partners, but it also will be very beneficial if EU will allocate at least 15% from their cohesion funds to the cities to build up better Europe for all its citizens.
First thing that I do, it will expand green spaces further, also improve transportation and connectability, and invest in cultural events, especially ones that bring people together, that create deeper communities and connections within the communities. EU would help greatly if provided focused funds specifically for green transportation, from investments in green infrastructure and sustainable green infrastructure, and also for cultural programs that bring communities together. That is my main take.
In Malaga, we have a problem which I think is common in other cities in Europe, which is massive tourism, which is displacing the residents from the city center. And also we have an important technology environment which is bringing to the city digital nomads that finally they settle there. So we need a lot of affordable housing in a short period of time. So how can the EU help us? Maybe we can settle a system to have a quick construction systems based on prefabrication and also industrialization, so we can settle a lot of dwellings in a short period of time.
80 years after the adoption of UN Charter and 57 years after the publication of the rights to the city by Henri Lefebvre, the resilience of both international law and of our cities is being tested. Improving cities means, above all, deepening and not shrinking the right of citizens in all directions. Vertically, by enabling the best practices of urban planning and innovation to reach the small scale of neighborhoods and everyday life. And horizontally, by making them available and accessible to all. And when we say to all, we mean to all. That means dismantling, not reinforcing privileges. So instead of narrowing their scope, we should expand and rethink the very meaning of care, accessibility, inclusiveness, and sustainability in new fields.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to all of you, and welcome indeed also to our online audience. And thank you so much for joining us this sunny afternoon at this Stakeholders Dialogue and Consultation on the Future EU Policy Agenda for Cities. I hope you enjoyed that video, which was obviously taken during this event, where we heard different perspectives on how lives could be improved for people living in cities. Before we begin, I want to remind you that interpretation is available, so if you need that, you can collect your interpretation headset just outside the door in the foyer, and it's available in Italian, Spanish, French, and Polish.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone back here in plenary this afternoon. I know it's been a very busy day of activities and lots of parallel sessions and different activities, so great that you've stayed with us for this session, this really important session. It's not only a stakeholder dialogue, the full title is Stakeholder Dialogue and Consultation on the Future EU Agenda for Cities, and it's a really important moment to reflect and to hear the different perspectives on that future agenda. In that context, we're delighted that we're being joined this afternoon by the European Commissioner, the Executive Vice President for Cohesion and Reforms, Raffaele Fitto, and in a bit we will invite him onto the stage to give us some opening remarks before we go to our panel. But first, I'm also delighted that we have 4 panelists here who are already on stage with us, and we're going to be having a discussion with you this afternoon. Just to introduce you, we have Mayor Matthias de Klerk, the Mayor of Ghent, and also recently elected President of Eurocities. Many congratulations on your election. We have Surika Edwards, who's the Secretary General of Housing Europe, the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing. Sina Rizzaporta, who is a board member at the Youth Forum, the voice of young people in Europe, and Karen van Kluizen, the Secretary General of Polis, the leading network of cities and regions working on sustainable mobility and innovation. And as you can see, we're delighted to have this different range of perspectives, both sectoral and stakeholder groups, and the city's perspective. So we look forward to hearing your perspective on the questions that we're going to address today.
Yes, so with our panelists in a short while, we'll be exploring what can be achieved through the future EU agenda for cities. And we'll be building on, I suppose, what we've learned in the current period in terms of what's working well and what can be improved. And we're going to focus our discussion really on 3 key areas, namely the alignment of policy and priorities between the EU and the city level. We're going to reflect a little bit on the types and level of support that's available to cities. And finally, we're going to look a little bit at multi-level governance and how well that's working in terms of giving a voice to cities at the EU decision and policy-making level. Unfortunately, we won't have time for a direct question and answer session with you, but we will be asking for your input and looking to take away some of your key ideas at the end through Slido, and which we're actually going to launch very shortly.
And I'd also like to take a moment just to remind you that throughout the Cities Forum, we have the 3 Slido rooms that are particularly designed to collect your input on the future agenda for cities. We have a room, a Slido room, that you can go in and suggest what you would like to retain and continue from the current framework. We heard in the opening, there's lots to be proud of. There's lots of great activities going on in support. So what do we want to continue? But we know it's not perfect, so there were also rooms for what you would like to change and what you would like to start, your new ideas that you would like to see reflected in the future agenda for cities. So please take a moment as you get inspired by the conversation, to go in there, look at the ideas already there, upvote the ones that you agree with, so we can start to see what the participants in this year's Cities Forum think. If your idea isn't there, add it in, and hopefully we'll reflect in the closing session on what we're seeing emerge from those rooms on Slido. But without further ado, I would like to invite onto the stage to give us some opening remarks the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Raffaele Fitto. Please, Commissioner, the floor is yours. Election.
Thank you. Dear mayors, dear local authorities, dear participants, it is an honor to be present at this forum today. It brings together European cities at a crucial moment for the future of the Union. Cities are key players in political life. They are not only beneficiaries of European policies, they are strategic actors capable of transforming common goals into concrete and visible change for citizens. Since the beginning of my mandate as Executive Vice President of the European Commission for Cohesion and Reforms, I have aimed to put cities at the center of our work. This is not only because more than 70% of the European population lives in urban areas, but also because they are places with many challenges but also opportunities for growth. The mission letter entrusted to me by President von der Leyen is clear: promote a modern, effective cohesion policy that is closer to the territories and is able to respond concretely to the new priorities of the Union. It is also calls for supporting the development of thriving, sustainable and inclusive regions and cities. As you know, as Executive Vice President for Cohesion and Reform, I am responsible for coordination of 3 other commissioners working on agriculture, tourism and transport, fisheries and the blue economy. These are key areas for urban life. These topics impact the daily lives of our citizens, from sustainable mobility to food security, from urban regeneration to the quality of local public services. It is on these issues that we are building an integrated common vision, a joint work with other commissioners to ensure coherence between sectoral policies and the needs of urban areas. In order to succeed, it is essential to listen to and involve urban authorities directly. Since the beginning of my mandate, I have constantly promoted dialogue and discussion with the representatives of cities and the local authorities. This is done both during my mission to the Member States, during which, in addition to meeting with the national government representatives, I always meet mayors and the local authorities to understand better the needs and the priorities of cities, and in Brussels through dedicated meetings. In May, for example, I met a delegation of mayors to address housing. In addition, in recent months, I met some of you relevant organizations, and I look forward to meeting even more. These meetings are crucial. Cities know the real needs of citizens and are place for democratic participation and innovation. It is also thanks to this dialogue that we are realistic and ambitious to address the path of the midterm review of cohesion policy. Cohesion is the Union's main investment tool at the local level. It is a policy where citizens see direct results for key issues in their lives. But today, it needs to adapt to the new European challenges. The midterm review is an important opportunity to update strategic priorities and to ensure that cohesion policy resources are used in a more targeted way for urban development and the strengthening of essential services. Why we propose the midterm review? Because the current program were decided from 2019 to 2021. The partnership agreement were signed in 2022. The programs are starting now, but the world is changed. And in our opinion, it's fundamental to have a different approach and to adapt the current program to these new priorities. We have identified 5 new priority areas where Member States, on a voluntary basis, can choose to reprogram funds: affordable housing, energy transition, water resilience, competitiveness, and defense. This choice stems from the urgency of tackling concrete challenges that today affect directly the lives of our citizens. To gain a better understanding of the issues facing cities and our citizens, we have carried out a Eurobarometer survey published today. This gives the perspective of European citizens on the challenges they face living in cities, towns and suburbs, but also rural areas. The main challenge is not a surprise. 51% of Europeans living in cities say affordable housing is an immediate and urgent problem. This underlines the urgency of our European affordable housing plan. The housing crisis affects millions of families and young people all over Europe, especially in our cities. Housing is not just an urban issue. It is a social, environmental, and democratic issue. It is also a problem in smaller towns and even in rural areas. At the same time, water resources are becoming central to urban resilience. Investing in infrastructure, smart networks, and water governance is no longer an option. This is a strategic urgency, and the European Union must stand by cities in this process. Other huge problems identified in the Eurobarometer survey where citizens in cities want improvements are quality of public services, security and safety in public spaces, improving urban transport, economic development and business opportunities. You will hear more on the Eurobarometer survey at a dedicated session tomorrow. These challenges are the reason that we are working to strengthen the role of cities in cohesion policy, not only as implementers, but as strategic partners. Therefore, as requested by President von der Leyen in my mission letter, we are working on an ambitious policy agenda for cities to harness the potential of cities as innovation, growth, and competitive engines. This agenda should provide a clear vision for the future of the cities, looking at issues such as housing, climate action, digitalisation, mobility, social inclusion, and equality. We intend to present the agenda by the end of the year. The objective is twofold. Firstly, to streamline existing EU support and make it more accessible for cities for all sizes. Secondly, to make cities' voices heard in future EU policymaking. First, rationalization. EU cities are a top priority. There are many European policy instruments for cities, not only in the field of cohesion policy, but also in EU sectoral policies. This offer is positive, but we need to facilitate access to it to make it fit for cities for all sizes. This should take into account the limited human resources and the budget of many smaller cities. This rationalization will build on existing instruments, such as the European Urban Initiative. The second objective of the agenda is the significant engagement of cities in EU policymaking. We will explore and propose ideas on how to better take into account cities' interests and concern when designing and implementing EU policies. I strongly believe in consultation, cooperation and collaboration between the different levels of governance. Dear participants, we need to work together to provide new solutions. The forum is an excellent opportunity to exchange ideas and for you to provide additional input. Your suggestions are vital to developing together the agenda for cities. Thank you for your many contributions to the Commission's call for evidence for the EU agenda for cities. These contributions provide a strategic overview of cities' needs and solutions. I invite you to make your voice heard at the national level, in particular in the context of the discussion of the next MFF. This is very important for us to reinforce the strategy for cohesion policy and to create the condition to have a right approach, not to defend the old approach of cohesion policy, but to support the modernization of cohesion policy. This is the challenge that we have in front of us. It is important that we all speak with only with one voice. This is another important point because we have many different positions regarding cohesion. But it's important to build a common solution, a common approach, a common proposal, because in this way it's possible to have a strong approach. We need to pass the same simple message. Cohesion policy means growth and jobs across Europe, today and tomorrow. Thank you for your commitment, for your work in the territories, and for your ability to strengthen European democracy every day. We will continue to work together. I look forward to continuing the discussion in this stakeholder dialogue and the forum. Thank you for your attention, and for me it's important also to remember one thing. When I started with my experience, political experience, I was a member of my local authorities. And for me, it's very important because I know how is important the role, the perspective of the local authorities and the cities in this way. And I'm convinced that it will be possible to work well together in the current discussion regarding the midterm review of cohesion policy, but in particular for the next MFF and also for the future of cohesion policy. I count on you, and I think that it will be possible, starting for this initiative, to work well together for the future of cohesion policy and of all territories, because it will be fundamental to defend, relaunch and modernize cohesion policy, because this policy will be a great opportunity to reduce the disparities on the territories, and will be an important occasion also to give the clear message regarding the strong, clear values of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Executive Vice President Fito, for those opening remarks, which really, I think, reinforce the importance of this moment of feeding into the future EU agenda for cities. And we're delighted that the Executive Vice President will remain with us for the remainder of this session, and we will give you the floor at the end for some closing remarks as well. So we look forward to hearing those in due course. Before we go to our panelists and start the discussion with them, we promised that we wanted to hear some of your perspectives in the audience on the topics that we're going to discuss today. So we've designed some quick-fire multiple-choice questions, which you should find via Slido. If you go back into the, if you go to Slido, make sure that you in the Cities Forum event, and then choose, there's a QR code on screen there for you if you need it. Make sure you're in the plenary room. And there'll be some survey questions looking at the topics that we're going to address with the panel. So in terms of how you see alignment or the misalignment between policies and priorities, your experience with different European programs and types of support, and finally multi-level governance. So we'll let you answer those, and we'll in due course show the answers and feed those into the discussion with our panelists. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Eileen to take us through our first round of questions with our panelists. Eileen.
Thank you, Ed. So let's kick off the panel discussion. Mayor de Klerk, I might come to you first. I suppose you're here in two ways, representing the city of Ghent, but also as the president of Eurocities. From both perspectives, maybe firstly from the perspective of Ghent and then from the Eurocities perspective, where do you think better alignment is needed between EU policies and local policies for addressing the challenges that we currently face in cities?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon on behalf of my side. First of all, maybe an experience from my city of Ghent, a medium-sized city, not that big, but not also too small. I can say, for example, that the alignment between EU and local policies is still too often missing. A good example is the energy performance of buildings directive. Belgium is a bit a complex country. You have a national government, a regional government, and you have the cities. And for example, in Flanders, the ban on fossil fuel borrow subsidies was announced in February, and it takes already effect in July. And on the European level, the Social Climate Fund won't start until 2026. So you see, we have a problem. And if cities have been consulted earlier, because that's a key message, not only to implement as a local city, but as a proactive partner, we could have flagged the social consequences. We could have proposed also transitional measures. And helped also align the timelines. So that's a very concrete example of how we can work better together, and that's very important. And that's why EU legislation must be assessed for their urban impact. Are they fair? Is it feasible? Do cities have the tools to implement them? And it's that kind of alignment we structurally need long-term. Mayors, local cities want long-term engagement. So we are walking parallel roads instead of a shared path. And that's where we have to be. So that could be better. For example, a smart, small thing to tell about these kind of alignments. But for example, there are also very good instruments. The EUI, the European Urban Initiative, that's the direct link, the direct funding. For example, in the city of Ghent, 2 great examples. Rewild the city, it's on climate adaptation, and also Ghent knapt op to stimulate vulnerable owners of a house to make it more energy sufficient, etc. So we have also good examples, but that's the direct link between the European level and the local level, and that's a bit a main message. That's the way we need more direct funding. Not directly through national or regional, but direct to the local level. And the agenda for the cities, because that's very important, and the Vice President mentioned it very well. We're looking forward to it. We have high expectations. It's very important. We see as cities 3 key levers. First of all, we need the legislation coherence. That's very important. Also accessible and direct funding. And third, also stronger capacity building, because not every city has the capacity to do it. And urban proving, it's not about the delay, but it's just to take the time to implement it better. To have the results in the daily life of our citizens. So we have some examples who can be better, and we have also good examples, and that's the lessons we have to learn for the new agenda.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. So coherence, direct funding, and capacity building are key in your view. So thank you very much. Karen, we might come to you next. I suppose thinking about the needs and roles of cities in terms of sustainable mobility, what do you think are the current strengths of the EU policy priorities, and where might some changes be needed?
Thank you for inviting me, first of all.
Very welcome.
Hi, everyone. So indeed, with policy, we focus on sustainable mobility and innovation in cities and regions. And overall, I have to say there is quite a strong alignment in terms of the priorities on the European level and on the local level when it comes to sustainable mobility. So there's been the Smart and Sustainable Mobility Strategy, there's the Urban Mobility Framework, there is the Smart and Climate Neutral Cities Mission, where transport has a component. So we see strong alignment there, and of course we're really looking forward now to this EU policy agenda for cities as well, to recognize, as the Vice President said, the voice of cities even more. Of course, there is alignment as long as the EU stays its course, because we see there is a change of narrative. There is a difference in the discourse from the previous legislative period, where we were talking about the Green Deal, where we were talking about climate, to the current period where we talk about competitiveness. And what we want to stress from our side in that respect is that those two, climate and competitiveness, can and should go hand in hand. There is such a thing as green growth. So we really want to stress that the Green Deal ambitions need to be kept. When we see the discussions within the context for the Fit for 55 package, for example, sometimes we're getting a bit scared that ambitions might end up being watered down. The forces of the industry, the lobbying forces of the industry in Brussels are very strong. And at the same time, I also want to stress that it's important to recognize how important cities and regions are when it comes to competitiveness. And that's sometimes overlooked in the current discussions, where the intention goes now to the industry deal. Without cities and regions, there is no such thing as European competitiveness. They are major procurers. They're major infrastructure managers. They are procuring mobility services, and this all should be taken into consideration when we have the discussion. Then let me zoom in on a couple of very concrete policy files in the transport field. Actually, a number of policy files that have been agreed in the previous period are now reaching the deployment stage. And so more concretely, we're talking, for example, about the revised 10T network regulation with over 400 urban nodes that have been identified and that will have to meet certain requirements, such as the development of a sustainable urban mobility plan. There is the revised ITS directive, which includes also requirements in terms of data sharing for local authorities or turning regulatory frameworks into machine-readable format. There is the city's mission, where we see that in the climate city contracts, transport really has a very important role to play. So we need to make sure that we also give the tools to cities to comply with these European files that really have a direct impact on them and where they need to meet these requirements. And that should be reflected also, of course, in funding and proper support. But also we need better mechanisms to monitor the implementation of that legislation. Is it going well? Are cities capable, and do they have the tools to implement the legislation, or do we need to adapt course along the way? And before we come with new legislation, let's make sure that these files are being properly implemented. So that's what I wanted to stress for now.
Very good. So there is good alignment, but definitely improvements to be made. Sorka, I'll come to you now. Affordable housing keeps coming up everywhere, both here in the Cities Forum and outside. As a representative of the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing, how do you want to see this key challenge addressed in the future agenda for cities?
Thanks a lot, Eileen, and it's an honor to be here. I think what we've seen in the last few months is giving us an excellent, let's say, path for continuation. And that is, we've seen a really a clear mobilization from the Mayors for City initiative with the full support of Eurocities. And I think they're playing a really essential role. I think we don't have to read the newspapers for long to see the threats to democracy and social justice in many countries and across the pond in the United States. It's a real threat, and cities are making sure that alarm bell is being rung. They are making a lot of noise about this extremely urgent issue, and because they are the ones that are answerable to citizens. They are directly answerable to citizens. They are seeing people failed by our current housing models on a daily basis, both at the most visible term of failure in homelessness, but also the overburden rate and the massive amounts of finance, private finance being poured into speculative housing models. And they are really raising the alarm bell. They are calling for a new housing paradigm. And those cities are taking the lead. And I think at our peril, we ignore that alarm bell being sounded. But how should that then reflect itself? And I think the comments being made by my colleagues are extremely crucial. Because cities are not islands. They cannot perform on the crucial issues around housing, but also obviously health, education, without a strong backing from national level and from European level. They can do a lot, some cities more than others, because they have the competence, the legal competence, the financing competence. But if we take the example of housing, for instance, yes, EU, we're talking about a doubling potentially of 6.5 billion to 13 billion in the current cohesion policy. The EIB is talking about potentially doubling, also pushing to increase from 5 billion. But if we look at the investment just in one member state alone, it's a 10 billion need annually. So it's a drop in the ocean, what we see from European level. So what is vital is that drop is giving the right signal, and it is, in the case of housing, going towards the best practices we see in Europe. investment in initiatives where we have seen actually work and actually answer this issue. But I think crucially, what we see too often is a lot of responsibilities being put, a lot of burden being put on the shoulders of cities, but without the resources. And I think this is what we really need to make sure with the plans for the next cohesion period. If we go towards a centralization of funding, we do have to make sure that we don't rely on a trickle-down financing, but we have to make sure that the finance reaches local level and helps cities fulfill their ambitions. So I think we have to look at this careful balance. So also look at policies like we mentioned DPPD, but if we think about the European semester and the signal that gives, if we think about the Stability and Growth Pact, if we think about where, for instance, is housing, is it on or off balance sheet, where does it fit with the debt rules? So if we at national level are not giving the right signals, and these are signals also coming from the central bank, what policies they have towards housing, this is going to make it even more, the stranglehold on cities to act, it's going to make it even more difficult. So
that's very important.
Loud and clear, thank you. Karen.
Establishing a direct link between policy compliance and funding support to be able to comply with those policies, complemented by capacity building that will create capable public authorities, and reconciling an urban approach with a sectoral approach.
Very good. They seem to be coming right out through the discussion. Many ideas there, but all very relevant, so thank you. Sorka.
Yes, I think the key message is not to place the burden at local level without providing the resources and the right policy framework, as we have seen too often. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, cities can't act alone, so we need the support of multi-levels of governance. So thank you all. Ed, I will hand over to you to close the session and to thank our panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please, this afternoon? Thank you very much for sharing those really different, interesting perspectives from sectoral, city, stakeholder groups. Really interesting to hear. I mean, it's a complex topic, but you had some really concrete ideas and proposals to share with the room. So thank you very much indeed for that. Now, we had some opening remarks from the Executive Vice President at the beginning to open our discussion. So I'd like to invite the Commissioner, Raffaele Fitto, back to the stage to give us some closing remarks to wrap up our stakeholder dialogue. So a round of applause, please, Executive Vice President Fitto.
Thank you for your contribution, for your suggestions. For me, it was very interesting, and I believe that it's important to underline some points. First of all is housing, because you spoke regarding this with many suggestions in this way. I think that it's important to underline that the European Commission, this Commission decided an important issues regarding this. First of all, as you mentioned, we have dedicated commissioners regarding this. This is an important message in this way. Second, we have important resources in the current programs, because now we have in the current programs 7 billion euro regarding housing. But it's important also to give some solution regarding the governance of these opportunities, to involve the private sector, to work with the European Bank, because it's important also to have this involvement. And I said before, and I would like to underline again the point regarding the midterm review, because we arrived at this proposal after different, very important meetings, because I met all 27 ministers of cohesion policy. I met the coordinators and the members of the Regio Committee in the European Parliament. I met the Committee of Regions. And during this meeting, They mentioned and they suggested many points regarding these 5 new priorities, but the point regarding housing was not only a proposal, but was not only a priority, but is an emergency, because the proposal, the request was this. In this way, I think that it's important also to underline another new responsibility in the European Commission, simplification. Simplification is another important portfolio, and I believe that will be crucial for the next MFF, because we started with the debate for the next MFF. For me, will not possible to enter in the details like you, because it's not possible now in this moment. But I think that flexibility and simplification are 2 fundamental priorities for the next MFF. And for cohesion in particular, I believe that it's an important opportunity also to redesign the policy in this way to give more flexibility. The midterm review gave this flexibility, the incentives and the flexibility. The other important point is the question regarding the principle of cohesion. You mentioned multi-level governance, shared management principles. I believe that these 2 principles will be fundamental for cohesion policy. We must defend this principle because they are crucial, but at the same time, I believe that it's important also to underline the point regarding tailor-made approach, because you spoke about the cities, about the big problem that we have in the cities, because in the cities we have the 70% the citizens that lives with a big problem of overpopulation, but at the same time we have another big problem in the internal rural areas with the dead population. And it will be important also to have the right approach also in this direction, and the tailor-made approach will be fundamental. Last week I went to Latvia and Estonia, and I went to the border. There is another world. It will be important to redesign not only the point regarding defense, but only the point regarding the perspective, economic perspective of that territories. And I hope that we'll have in the next week the opportunity to work together. This cities forum for me is important, for DG Regio is very important, but I believe that the suggestions that you said before are fundamental for me. The mayor of Ghent knows well the work that we are doing together, and it's important to continue in this way, because another important thing is to have a strong involvement in this direction. These 2 days here is an important moment because we have an important involvement. For us, it's important to listen your position, your suggestion, to have a clear idea regarding this point, because the agenda for the cities will be the fundamental point to build the future of the cities. Also with the attention with the different points that you said. My availability is full, and I believe that it will be possible to build strong cities in the strong Europe for our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for your closing remarks, and indeed for joining us here today, taking the time to listen to the voices of our stakeholder representatives here on the panel, and the messages coming out of the Cities Forum 2025 for the future EU agenda for cities. Just before we close, we said that we would try to collect your takeaways. You may have been inspired by some of the practical suggestions that we had from our panelists from the discussion. So we're launching another short survey via the Slido room. So go back into plenary if you want to take part. We will leave this survey open after the session because you might want to take a little bit of time to think. These are not necessarily simple questions, but in terms of what key change you would want to see made to EU-level policy, what one recommendation would you make to improving the programs and types of support, and what you think the key is to better multi-level governance. So we'll leave those questions open into the evening. So take some time to reflect based on what we've discussed, and we'll collect and we'll perhaps try to reflect on your answers in the closing session tomorrow, rather than attempting to do that directly now. So that concludes the stakeholders dialogue and consultation session. So thanks once again to all our panelists and to the Executive Vice President for joining us here today. Round of applause, please. And then it just remains for me to, before you leave the stage, just to give some practical information for what's happening next, because there's an exciting offer from the city of Krakow. They're inviting us to an official cocktail dinner. And the way that we're going to organize this is that we're going to set off in groups to walk across, because it's hosted outside in the Museum of Engineering and Technology. So we propose that we meet and we set off from in front of this venue here at 15:15, and then 10 minutes after until 6:45. There will be an official welcome from the city of Krakow, so we encourage you to be there on time if you're able to. It will be a great evening. I'm not going to give away all the surprises, but I heartily recommend that you join us there for a great evening, a celebration of the discussions so far. And Jen just reminds me to say tomorrow morning we start again at 9 a.m. sharp. The Executive Vice President mentioned the Eurobarometer results, which were published today. We will be hearing a presentation about what those results were at 9 o'clock. So do join us at 9 o'clock to hear that, and then we will follow on into the Mayor's debate. So we look forward to seeing you bright and fresh in the morning. Have a great evening at the cocktail dinner, courtesy of the city of Krakow this evening. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.